Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Chop Shop. I am your host, Pastor Marvin McKinstry Jr. of the Great Victory House Worship Center Church. The first thing I need y'all to do is to like, love, and share. I'm going to my own Facebook page, opening this bad boy up, and I want y'all to tag people in the comments that needs to be here for this conversation tonight. We got a power pack show, but before we get to that, I gotta say what's up and show some love to my right hand and my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts, on the ones and twos, making the magic happen behind the scene techniques 1200s. Because anything else is uncivilized. Shaka ain't coming on the screen tonight. He's working his magic and doing what he do, but he's gonna stay backstage. Y'all lift up a prayer for him. Just come on, tell God to heal him, and we're gonna keep it going. Amen. Amen. With that being said, I want to salute the Black History moment that took place on yesterday. Yesterday, for the first time in the history of the state of Maryland, a statewide office, the highest office in the state, a black man was sworn into. If you like African American or whatever the case may be, I'm cool being black. A black man was sworn in as the 46th governor of the state of Maryland. Um, y'all, listen, this is significant historically because this has never happened before. And he's not the only one. We had him and Anthony Brown, both elected to statewide office. It was a big happening. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I didn't watch any of the celebrations. I didn't go to the party. My boots still on the ground trying to get work done. But listen, y'all know me. I'm gonna be covering this man in prayer and praying that God give him the right counsel and the right people. Because I'm gonna tell y'all the truth. We made history. Y'all put some hearts in the comments. Y'all had a bang up party last night. Put some hearts in the comments. Now it's time to get to work. Now it's time to get to work. All right. So with that being said, we're gonna roll on. Shout out to Westmore, Wendy Moore. We love you. God be with you through this journey of leading our state. And we about to get to the church announcements. Who's that? That's Scola. Y'all look shock show and stuff. I'm out of tune. I don't know who it is. But y'all, we're gonna go and get on to these church announcements. As always, kicking off the church announcements is the Stop the Beef hotline. Why? Because until we see zero murders in the city of Baltimore, we are going to continue to push the Stop the Beef hotline. We need everybody to make sure that you're sharing this information. If you know somebody that's involved in a situation that could lead to violence without any police involvement, we want you to contact the two numbers, that are listed on the screen so that we are able to do intervention. We do intervention at multiple levels. The only way we can get involved, though, is if you get us involved. Push this. The Men of the We Are Us movement are going to come, and we're going to step in, and we're going to try to do what we do, make a difference in this and any and every situation. And walking hand in hand with it is the Baltimore Peace Agreement. That's right, y'all. It's been circling now, I believe, for 3 years. Martin Luther King celebration this past week made 3 years that this thing has been circulating in the community. And literally, we have doubled back to brothers that have signed off on the Baltimore Peace Agreement. And to date, no one that has signed off on peace has found themselves in a situation where they become incarcerated or they become a statistic in Baltimore. So, y'all, we're going to keep pushing the peace agreement. If we haven't already, we are prepared to come to an area near you. All right, all right, all right. The Mayor's Office of Employment Development, the Employ Baltimore show. Today was the first time I hosted it in New Year. We talked about the big job fair that CFG Bank Arena is having on this Saturday. Make sure you get down to the convention center. Make sure you put your good looking clothes on. Y'all don't dress for job fairs like y'all used to. Boy, we got people show up looking like anything, Shot. Put your good looking stuff on, your good smelling stuff on. Put your best foot forward. Go down there. They have a whole lot of positions that they're looking to fill. Administrative positions, hospitality positions, security positions. Man, get down there and get that money, man. All right. Sunday worship at Victory House Worship Center in the great Southwest Baltimore. The community where I grew up is now the community where I give back. Make sure you come through Sunday morning at 10 a.m. We are at 1063 West Fayette Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21223. Come through. Worship, family, community, healing, unity. That's what it's all about, y'all. An empowered and message of empowerment. All right. All right, here's some of the pictures, y'all. Monday. The brothers came out and the mayor allowed us to lead the parade because when they were saying it wasn't going to be a parade, the minute the We Are Us Men's Movement said we were coming down Martin Luther King anyway. So they let us get in the front and lead the parade. And you see me with some of my brothers, Bishop Dr. Kevin Daniels, Pastor Corey Barnes, my man EB. And in this last shot, you're going to see the hundreds of brothers and family members. It wasn't just men this time, y'all. The hundreds of beautiful black people that walked with the men of the We Are Us Men's Movement in the parade. Y'all, listen, it was a happening and it was much needed. I'm grateful that our mayor stood up and said that, hey, we got to have a parade to celebrate the legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King. The people came out and it was a beautiful sight to see. All right. With all of that being said, now it's time to get to the show. If you have not already, I need you to like, love, and share this broadcast. And I need you to even tag people in the broadcast that you think should be here with us tonight because we're going to be talking with two powerful leaders in the city of Baltimore. The first one is the director of policy for the Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. And y'all know he is probably not in Baltimore with us tonight because if Annapolis is hot, he's there advocating for the city of Baltimore and for black people at large. He's one of my favorite guys. He's a national contributor to some national platforms like Roland Martin, but he always finds time to come through here because he know we want to make sure it's important that Baltimore knows what's happening in Annapolis. I'm talking about the one and only director of policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, Mr. Dayvon Love. What's up, Dave?
Hey man, good to see you, bro.
Always a pleasure, man. I'm excited to talk to you. I've been thinking about it all week because, last year was kind of a time when we were looking at some things that had some historic implications. And you came on and Ray came on to help us understand that the deployment of a lot of what was those new things was going to come out over some time. But this year, aside from this education bill from one of our friends and your mentor, I mean, not education bill, this violent crime bill for youth, um, we don't really have that hot button topic in Baltimore that's kind of at the center of this session. So it was important for me to get you on here and get you on early so the people of Baltimore know what things we should be looking at, especially with this shifting in leadership in Annapolis. Tell the people a little bit about you and Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle.
So well, first, always love to be on this show. For us, the power comes from the community. You know what I'm saying? And so, Leaders of Beautiful Struggle, grassroots think tank. Revolutionary Pan African nationalists is our perspective. About Black people practicing freedom and sovereignty. You know what I'm saying? Practicing self determination. We're not the problem, we're the solution to our own problems. You know what I mean? And so that's really the basis of how we operate. And a lot of our work focuses on policy. So that's a lane that we've decided to occupy that, I think in a lot of contexts gets ignored. Being in that kind of legislative space, we're looking at like how the rules are made for how the society is governed, because that's essentially what policy is about, is being able to impact the rules that are made in terms of how society is governed and be able to impact the distribution of resources. One of the things that I tell when I do trainings about what it means for Black people to exercise power, you either doing one of three things. You either impacting policy, you either impacting the distribution of resources, or you're building an independent institution, right? So those are the ways in which if you're engaged in challenging the status quo and building power and practicing power, those are the three. And so the policy lane is the place where we kind of focus our work in general.
That is a very understated lane, and it's why I always reach out to you because, again, without having a George Floyd or Freddie Gray or a hot button topic surrounding a particular situation or circumstance, session is kind of opened up a little quiet as it pertains to the citizens of Baltimore. Give us some insights into some of the things that are on the table, though they're not all over the news, that Baltimoreans should be looking out for.
So as you mentioned, we have a new governor, first Black governor in the state's history. But what's more important from the policy perspective is that he's a resident of Baltimore. He's someone who has a good relationship with Baltimore. That's important because Larry Hogan for the past 8 years, given his base, the messaging that base feeds off of is the kind of demonization of Baltimore, right? That's kind of the basis for how they relate to it. That again gets his basics. Hogan's the former governor's basic cited. So now we have a governor that has a relationship with Baltimore. It presents a bunch of opportunities, particularly when it comes. And the most important function of the governor is setting the budget, and that's something that often gets overlooked, but it's really the most important thing. We're talking about 34, $35 billion that the governor has to allocate every year. And so, we have an opportunity to be able to be more involved in the decision as to how those resources are allocated. One additional technical thing that's also important, it's technical, but I think important. The Maryland Constitution was changed by referendum a few years ago. It used to be that when the governor proposes the budget, that a delegate or a senator, they could only propose that the legislature could only propose cuts to the budget. Well, now there's a new the charter had, or the constitution rather, has been changed such that now the legislature can add line items. They can cut and add line items. That's going to present a new dynamic in Annapolis, because the governor now has to do more wrangling and more negotiation with the legislature, given that they can, and they have a veto-proof majority, right? So the legislature has more leverage in the process of how the budget is ultimately constructed in ways that previously wasn't the case in prior administration. So this is actually the first year where that new change is present. One of the things that I want to eventually talk more about, but is relevant to the budgeting question, when you think about like investments in particular things in Baltimore, like one of the things that we're going to work on during this session, and this isn't legislative per se, but getting more access to state dollars to the brothers and sisters at We Are Us. Like really trying to get more state funding directly to the folks on the ground that's really doing the work. Again, with Hogan in office, that just was a lot harder, right? There was really no basis for being involved in that process in terms of allocation of resources. But with Governor Moore being there, being a Democrat, being someone friendlier to Baltimore, there's more ability to press him on that. And so on any issue where allocation of resources is an issue, Baltimore is positioned better in that regard. In terms of legislative things for folks to look out for.
Before you go to the
Yeah.
legislative things, I want to
Hmm.
get your personal opinion. Is
Yep.
it your expectation that, on that opinion, your perspective, is it your expectation that um, we have a reasonable expectation of Governor Moore to do what we need done in Baltimore with funds allocation, whether that's based on or allocation of resources in general, whether that's based on some conversations you may have had or interactions or just what you may know about him that the average citizen may not know?
I mean, I expect the relationships that got him elected, many of them emerged from Baltimore and networks in Baltimore. So at the very least, Baltimore will see much more favor from the executive than they did from Larry Hogan. Now, doing better than Larry Hogan in that regard isn't hard, right? And so I think, and this goes to something that I've said on your show before when he won the nomination, which is that we have to be willing as a community to hold him accountable. I remember, I was young when Barack Obama was elected president, and I remember thinking to myself when he won, everybody else was celebrating, but I remember thinking like, damn, it's going to be really hard to get people to understand, like the system don't change because there's one black man here, and I get the celebrations are great. And so I felt similarly yesterday. I actually went to the ball yesterday, and it's nice. It's nice, people deserve to feel good. But I just get real concerned that we have to ensure that he's one person in a large institution that has a history, that has a bunch of other things around it. And it's going to be very important that if we want to make sure that we get more than just a little bit better than Hogan, then we're
That
going to have to really press.
And I've learned at this stage of my life, my leadership, my walk with Christ, to kind of hold my peace on some of those things. But that's kind of where I am. I'm not gonna lie, Dayvon. Like, and a lot of it has a lot to do with the Obama administration. Like, okay, we made history. I'm good with that. Y'all had a bang up party last night. I'm good with
Mm-hmm.
that. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not um to have some unreasonable either expectation or foot to the fire. I know that there were people that were upset with people like Michael Eric Dyson and others who were critical of Barack Obama because he was a black man, and saying that they weren't critical of other administrations. But who should hold us accountable besides us?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And in many, and I'm sure Governor Moore knows this. You know, a lot of black people in Baltimore, like when you think about Baltimore as a city and all the contribution it makes to the culture and the fourth floor of the state of Maryland, what I'm saying? He himself and his ascendancy to the governor's mansion, Baltimore was a big part of that. What I'm saying? And so it can't be a thing where we're afraid to say, yeah, well, this is what we expect. I think we have, just as we would do with anybody else, be able to go to the administration, right? Because I think sometimes we got to take it out of like the individual person. We got to be
I,
able to go and say, like, we are the reason why you are viable here, and have the negotiation and conversation from that vantage point, as opposed to like what I think people have been socialized to do, which is please do it. You know what I mean?
and I want to talk about policy, but I got to talk about this while we're here, because even the culture concerning local administration as it pertains to our people, and institutions that attempt some measure of accountability. Like, we have a mind frame that is more interested in protecting black leaders than holding them accountable. We can look at the school board, we can look at local city government, and now the same mentality being in the state house. What do you think it is that fuels that thought process or that way or approach to people, as opposed to, okay, you here now, these are the things we need you to hold up to?
Yeah, see, for me, there's a few things that got to be parsed out. Like there's certain things that got to be separated out. So, for instance, like I'm clear that for the most part, and of course there are a handful of exceptions, but for the most part, black elected officials are sharecroppers of white corporate and political power. Right? Many of them get to where they got because they know what networks they got to be in to get the resources they need, to get the platform they need to be a viable candidate. None of that has anything to do with black people, right? And so one of the challenges is that as a community, we don't have the independent electoral infrastructure to produce our own candidates for office. So when I look at many of the folks that are in public office now, they don't work for us. So I don't treat them like they work for us, right? What I do is we got to make it hurt for them to not do what we need to do, right? And to the extent that we can make it hurt and make it so that they do what we need them to do, that's the relate. Even people I'm friendly with, they're clear that that is the perspective we take. We're gonna make it hurt till you got to do what it is that we need you to do. So I think from that perspective, I think many people are cynical about black elected officials. Many people are dissatisfied with the
I am jaded,
ineffectiveness.
brother.
Absolutely, because
When it comes to that, I'm damaged goods. And thank God for wisdom and holding my peace and knowing the proper spaces to have those conversations. Because to me, my expectation, and then yesterday, the responsiveness to the celebrity parade, like, okay, cool, if that's what you into, because I'm serious. I gave zero energy and attention to any of it, you
hmm
know. And again, it's because for me, I'm not saying for anybody else, I walk through the pain daily.
hmm
I'm involved in the pain daily. I'm dealing with the people who are at the pinnacle of struggle every day. So I ain't
hmm
impressed with Oprah coming. I ain't mad.
right,
Y'all
right,
don't label me the
right,
angry show host or not. But I'm not okay. Oprah came. I don't care about that.
right, right.
I care about when the rubber meets the road, and you talked about what we need to talk about, the resources. getting to where they need to get to in order
Hmm.
for us to be able to see the kind of change that we desire to see here in Baltimore. When you talked about the resources, are you talking about straight from the governor's mansion to the right folks to do the work, or is that still
That's
going to
right.
have to come through the city?
So it doesn't have to come through the city. One of the biggest problems that we have, and again, it's one of those technical things, but it's tremendously important, is having black-led intermediary institutions that can take large amounts of public dollars and get it to the ground. Part of the problem we have is that we don't have those containers. Some refer to them as like fiscal agents or fiscal sponsors, right? Some you may or CDCs even, right? But some kind of vehicle that can take those large amounts of public dollars. Because what happens is that there are a bunch of entities that are able to get access to those dollars that aren't our community,
Well, I
right?
remember going to war a few years ago when it came down to the youth fund, and Adam vehemently advocating against Strong City being
Hmm.
the fiscal sponsor agent. And now we see where Strong City is in the sense of the news and all of those kinds of things. But the thing that got me about that is how many black people were upset with Adam because
Hmm.
Adam was going after Strong
That's right.
City.
That's right. That's right.
And now
That's
look.
right, right. It's here's the thing with that, right? And I think that's a good example because of the condition that black people are in. Like I like to use the framework of like being a colony, right, of this empire. And part of the way colonialism works is that when you're dependent on your oppressor for the things you need to survive, it becomes a mechanism of control to curb the ability to resist. And so with the strong city piece, you had a lot of folks who were dependent on strong city to get access to those resources. And so that is a way that resistance to the status quo is able to be curbed. It's similar to one of the things that Hubert Henry Harrison said in Negro in the Nation in 1919. The difference between chattel slavery, like pre-Civil War, post-Civil War. Pre-Civil War is chattel slavery enforced by brute force. Post-Civil War is wage slavery enforced by starvation. And it's that starvation piece. That's the way the legacy of the plantation persists today, is the ability to use starvation as a mechanism of control, right? And so that's why I mentioned the importance of those black-led community-based intermediary entities that can take those large sums of public dollars, because this is going to be one of the challenges. Like when we talk to Westmore's administration, one of the things that we may run up against is folks saying, well, how are we going to get them the money? Now, there are ways to do it, and we're prepared to respond effectively so that the monies can get where it has to go. But there are legitimate challenges in getting money to grassroots organizations because public dollars are tremendously difficult to manage. There are a whole lot more red tape when it comes to accessing public dollars, but it's Black people's greatest access to capital, right? We just don't have the level of wealth, right, that white folks have access to. So public dollars, in many respects, is our greatest access to the capital we need. And we taxpayers, there are a bunch of companies that do business with the city, the state, that are benefiting from our tax dollars. So we should get the return on our investment as people who live here. So in our interactions with the administration, again, one of the big things we're going to be focusing on is trying to get those dollars to We Are Us. And it's a shame. I mean, one thing I want to say real quick just about this is because I know you and many of the brothers that are part of that, y'all expertise gets used by all these other organizations that are getting access to all this funding, but the folks who are really on the ground continue to get, pennies.
So
You know what I mean?
let me give you back what you said too, because you talked about one of the areas, and y'all, we gonna have a policy conversation with Dayvon probably on the end of session maybe, because we got to go with this. This is important. What is prohibiting the building of the institutions for the black community to be able to become that political power, to have that leverage? Because I even looked at Martin Luther King Day and how many black brothers and sisters was out there wearing their Greek letters and colors, right? Like we literally feed into these organizations and these institutions, but we have no institution where we can, and I watched a bunch of preacher friends of mine. I love them. I ain't mad at nobody, but they connect with an organization like Build because they feel like Build has the power and the strength. Our dollars got to go through organizations like Strong City. What is preventing Black people from building the institutions to no longer need the builds, to no longer not only have the Greek organizations and all of that sort of thing that we suit up for? What is the thing that's hindering Black Baltimore, the majority Black Baltimore, from
Hmm.
building those institutions for ourselves?
Because of the the wealth in our community isn't at the level it needs to be compared to our white counterparts. In order to build infrastructure, it requires capital to build it. So sometimes people think like in order to just pass money through, you just go somebody, some quick paperwork, money goes where it got to go. But there's so much involved in building an intermediary institution. So it's not just bookkeeping, right? There are a bunch of other aspects of transfer of dollars that matters and requires money to be able to pull those resources together. Part of the challenge is, and the challenge is a legitimate challenge. I just think the way people have answered the challenge has been incorrect, which is if you're an individual person trying to do a program, right? And you have two choices. You have the big corporate white institution that can take a lesser fee, that can handle your money more efficiently, right? As opposed to the Black entity, which is smaller, has less capital, might get you your money slower, might have to charge a larger fee to be competitive. If you focus on your own individual entity, then you're gonna pick the big white corporate joint, right? Because it's just more efficient for your individual needs, right? And so what happens is that many of us get caught in a situation where we have short-term needs that we need addressed, and the big corporate white entities are best positioned to meet those needs. So this is where we have to think about it systematically, right? Because individual actions are not going to be what changes it. So the systematic approach is that we need government investment in building those black entities and infrastructures so that they are a viable option and alternative to the existing entities. So the reason why Strong City was able to have, in some respects, a monopoly in the kind of fiscal sponsorship arena is because they were bigger, had access to the resources, right? So it was easier to do that, right? And so the resources it takes to build an entity like that I think requires government investment. And part of the challenge is that it's just not a conversation that's had enough publicly because the average resident may say, why are we spending money on that? There are all these other things that requires resources. Why are we spending money on a fiscal intermediary or a CDC? We need money for kids that's dying in the streets. And so one of the things we end up having to explain is if we build this intermediary that the community controls, we can bring more of those dollars to the community, right? So that's one of the things we spend a lot of time trying to get people to understand, because otherwise, like I mentioned in the beginning of this explanation, it's the big white corporate entities that will monopolize that role of being the intermediary, and then the monies will never get to our community the way it needs to.
Wow, man. We have literally had our time just about and have not talked about individual policies. You got any areas of focus that Black Baltimore, especially when Baltimore Day comes up? I know we had our law enforcement partners down there before the legislature on yesterday. What are some of the priorities that we need to focus on? We got about 5 minutes.
Well, I tell you what, and I'll come back on another time to talk about the broader scope. But there are two things I want to put on people's radar. One is cannabis. So we talked about cannabis last session. Um, right now, they're going to be focused on regulating the industry. So it passed on the ballot in November of 2022, where cannabis will be legalized recreational. So now it's the question of regulating the business. We're going to be focusing on make sure that Black people get the largest share of access to that business as possible, right? So that's really what that is in a nutshell. And again, I can come on another time and talk about the mechanics of that. The second thing that I want to mention, and this is an outgrowth of the cannabis piece, is that one of the things we got past last session was the establishment of the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund. So this was on the bill that had to do with the cannabis legalization. And what that bill did was that 30% of the revenues from recreational cannabis is going to go into this fund. Each jurisdiction will get a percentage of the fund. That percentage will be determined based on that jurisdiction's contribution to cannabis related arrest over the last 20 years. So what that will basically do is the jurisdictions where cannabis enforcement was the highest will get the largest proportion. Baltimore City, Prince
Reparate,
George's
call it what
County.
it is, man.
That's there.
Reparations.
There it is. There
That
it
word they
is.
don't like for us to use.
There it
Reparations.
is. And
Uh,
so each jurisdiction, the way it works is each jurisdiction has to pass a law that will determine how those resources are spent. So that passed, and we're currently working with the city council president's office and Councilman Burnett on Baltimore's version of it, which will be a reparations bill, right? So we're going to establish a reparations commission where the monies that come back from recreational cannabis, those monies will be will be allocated, and the commission will be focused on having people who have a rigorous body of knowledge or rigorous background of work, either on reparations or the war on drugs, right? To ensure that the right people are there to be able to invest those resources where they need to go. So we expect that bill to be that's a city council bill. So that's not Annapolis. That's going to be in the Baltimore City Council. We expect that to be introduced in February. And so we're going to really want to make sure we have community support. It's going to be pretty historic to be able to establish this reparations commission and to actually have a revenue stream with substantial money. Just to give people a sense of how much money we're potentially talking, there was a report that came out recently that said that in the first 2 years of Maryland's recreational cannabis industry, they're looking at a potential of $1 billion, right? $1 billion. So if we take $1 billion and we talk about the potential tax revenue from that, we're talking, and the fund that we're described, the fund of the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund, this is every year. So this is like a one-time set of money. This is every year in perpetuity that these resources would come back to this commission that we're trying to establish. So we're going to really need the community support and the local city council and making sure that the bill is going to pass. It'll likely be, because it's a legislative requirement of the bill that passed in 22, it'll likely go through the Legislative Oversight and Rules Committee, which is chaired by Yitzi Scheifler of the 5th
oh
District.
God.
You know, so we may have some fun with that. I'll put it that way. So
Well,
we're
listen,
gonna
that's
need
a
the
hearing.
community.
That's a hearing. I think I'm gonna make sure I show up to.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
So we're gonna
I
need the
don't.
community support.
Yeah, I don't know what he would do because I don't know if Upper Park Heights is ready to have a cannabis store up there. But if it's gonna
Mm.
be $1 billion in taxable revenue, Yitzi may try to get it up there. Dayvon, thank you, man, for being with us as always, man. You
Yes,
bring
sir.
great insights. We definitely gonna have you back. I'm gonna shoot you a date in February, right after we get off the air tonight, man, because we just gotta keep your voice present and fresh before the people. In that conversation, I really would like to unpack just the impact of that industry. And listen, preachers and pastors, we cannot be afraid of this conversation. It's going to be recreational, it's going to be legalized, and your theology has got to be sound concerning the business aspect of it and the use of it. So go and get to studying and land before the Lord. Because I can see some of y'all now. I can see you now struggling with it. But we're gonna need to have some real insight. So man, we're gonna bring you back just to unpack that and to look at that bill. Because when did you say it was coming? Late February?
I mean, it's gonna happen throughout session, but I'll come back in February when the bill is dropped, so that we can talk about it.
Awesome, Dayvon. Thank you for being with us as always, man. I'm excited to have that conversation. Can't wait to get you back on with us. And thank you for constantly being a contributor, man. You never tell us no.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, bro. You take care.
All right, thank you.
All right, peace.
A shot. They gonna have to give and the Bible says give an answer.